Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Anish Chakravarti and today I will be speaking on moral dilemma. I'm from University of Delhi, so let's discuss about what is moral dilemma in detail today. Before we discuss about moral dilemma, we should know what is ethics and what is a dilemma. Now, ethics is a branch of philosophy which deals and studies with the evaluations of our codes of conduct or moral principles of action. So where morality is about our principles of action, ethics is about evaluation of those moral principles of action. Now, however, we often face a dilemma about what course of action or conduct we are supposed to follow. Before we understand what is a moral dilemma, let's understand the term dilemma in a philosophical sense. A dilemma is a situation in which a person is ought to choose between two or more competing options, each of which leads to different outcomes. The defining characteristic of a dilemma is that each option has a significant drawbacks or benefits, making the decision challenging. Technically, a dilemma is a conflict that arises when there is no clear or easy solution, because the available choices are mutually exclusive and equally compelling or problematic. So a dilemma is a situation where we are equally compelled to choose or not to choose the situations that are there, and mostly these situations are mutually conflicting. So often we see that in our situations of life where we have to take a course of action, we often face a dilemma, particularly where we are supposed to conduct ourselves in a specific way. Well, before we get more into discussing about moral dilemma, let's discuss about the categories or the types of dilemmas that exist. So we have what we call as the logical dilemma. Logical dilemmas involve conflict between principles of logic or reasoning. So these are dilemmas where we often understand the causes or the nature of the causes. However, they are equally opposite compelling causes or reasons which may also be the answers to the dilemma, thereby leading to a conflict. And when we try to resolve those, these are called logical dilemmas. Then we have ethical or moral dilemma. Ethical or moral dilemma involves a conflict between moral principles, which basically makes it a part of normative ethics. So at times we have principles which are deciding our oughts and ought nots. However, these principles are not just one but many or few, and these come in conflict with each other. So the issue concerning there becomes relevant and pertinent as to how we resolve them and find a one course or a resolved course of action. Then we have practical dilemmas, where moral dilemmas or ethical dilemmas, to be specific, were more concerned with normative ethics of principles in understanding and theory. Practical dilemmas involve conflict in everyday decision making, where each option has practical consequences. So practical dilemmas largely fall within applied ethics. And all these logical dilemma, ethical and moral dilemma, and practical dilemmas that we have in our decision making are all sometimes connected or disconnected, depending on the nature of the concept, situation, and the need. Now we can come to understanding what is a moral dilemma. A moral dilemma is a specific type of dilemma where the conflicting choices involving moral principles or ethical values. In a moral dilemma, an individual must decide between two or more actions, each of which has a moral implications that may conflict with one another. The challenge in a moral dilemma is that any choice made will result in some form of moral compromise, often involving harm, injustice, or the violation of a deeply held principle. So we can see some examples of moral dilemma in order to understand what it means and entails. We have one very famous classical moral dilemma, which is called the trolley problem. A classical moral dilemma where one must choose between diverting a runaway trolley to a track where it will kill one person or doing nothing and allowing it to kill 5 people on its current track. So that's the trolley problem, which we will further discuss in a bit detail afterwards. Then we have another important example of a moral dilemma called the honesty versus kindness. Often the situation arises where we have to choose whether to tell a harsh truth or a comforting lie to a person, where honesty and kindness are both valued but in conflict in the situation that is there. The third kind of an example that can be there as a moral dilemma, which is a very good example, is of loyalty versus truth. Loyalty versus truth is a moral dilemma where a person must choose between telling the truth or being loyal to someone. In this situation, the values of honesty and loyalty come into conflict. So in a moral dilemma, there is no clear right answer, and the resolution often depends on individuals' values, beliefs, and the ethical framework they apply. The study of moral dilemmas helps us understand the complexities of moral decision making and the challenges of applying ethical principles in real world situations. Now let's discuss the trolley problem in detail so as to exemplify and understand moral dilemma in a better manner. Trolley problem is a famous moral dilemma that explores the ethical implications of making difficult decisions involving life and death. So often dilemmas are serious when it has serious consequences. Here's how it typically goes. So there is a scenario 1 where we can imagine a runaway trolley is speeding down a track. Up ahead, there are 5 people tied to the track who will be killed if the trolley continues on its current path. You are standing next to a lever that can divert the trolley onto another track. However, on this alternate track, there is one person tied down. You have 2 choices. So there is one track where there are 5 people tied up, and the trolley is naturally or supposedly going to move on that path. And on the other alternative path, there is one man tied down, and you have 2 choices to make. The first choice is to do nothing, and the trolley will continue on its path, killing the 5 people. The second choice is that we pull the lever, diverting the trolley onto the other track, where it will kill 1 person. So the question is what one ought to do. To be passive and to do nothing, or to take a voluntarily action to kill 1 person and save 5. Scenario 2. There is another scenario that we can imagine in this trolley problem. In a variation of this trolley problem, we can see that you are on a footbridge over the tracks next to a very large man. The trolley is again heading towards 5 people. This time you have no lever to pull, but you realize that if you push the large man off the bridge onto the tracks, his body will stop the trolley, saving the 5 people. However, this action will kill the large man. Your choices are, again, it's a similar situation than scenario 1, except for the fact that instead of pulling the lever, here we have to push the large man or not. Now the first choice is that we do nothing, and the trolley will kill the 5 people. So if we do nothing and let the trolley move, it will kill 5 people. However, the second option is that we push the large man onto the track, stopping the trolley and killing him, but saving those 5 people. So here we can, at the cost of 1 person, we can save 5 people. So in overall, 4 people. Moral dilemma here is that the trolley problem forces us to consider the ethical principles of utilitarianism, that is maximizing overall happiness or minimizing harm, versus deontological ethics, which is basically the following of moral rules or duties such as not killing. So where utilitarian principle might allow us to save more number of people at the cost of few, deontological ethics on the other hand would suggest that life of each one matters, irrespective of whether they are 1 or 5 or more. So therefore, it is not right, according to deontological ethics, to kill 1 for the sake of 5. However, for utilitarian thinking, it could be that it's fine to save 5 at the cost of 1. The dilemma challenges us to weigh the consequences of our actions and question whether it's morally permissible to sacrifice 1 life to save many others. Moving on to the next dilemma, which we briefly discussed, was honesty versus kindness. It's a dilemma, it's a dilemma where A person must choose between being honest, which may cause pain or discomfort, and being kind, which may involve telling a lie or withholding the truth to protect someone's feelings. Moral dilemma in this values of honesty and kindness are both important but can conflict with each other in certain situations. The challenge is that being truthful may hurt someone's feelings, damage a relationship, or create discomfort, whereas being kind might require you to compromise on honesty, potentially leading to deception or lack of transparency. For example, imagine a friend asks you for a feedback on an outfit they love and plan to wear to an important event. You genuinely think that the outfit is unflattering and might lead to embarrassment. You face a dilemma. Because if you be honest, you tell your friend the truth explaining that you don't think that the outfit looks good. This might hurt their feeling, but it would be an honest feedback. Kindness, you tell your friend that the outlook looks fine to spare their feelings and boost their confidence, even though you don't think that's the right dress to wear. This would be kind but involves not being fully truthful. So there's this ethical conflict. If you choose honesty, you uphold the value of truth, believing that it's better to be straightforward and transparent, even if it is temporary discomfort to the other person. And if you choose kindness, you prioritize your friend's emotional well-being, aiming to protect their feelings, but at the cost of honesty. So the moral dilemma arises because both honesty and kindness are virtues that are typically wanting to be held. In this situation, they pull us in different directions. The decision on which values to prioritize often depends on the context, the potential consequences, and the individual's ethical beliefs. Coming to the third example of moral dilemma is the loyalty versus truth. Truth, on one hand, telling the truth upholds honesty, transparency, and integrity. It reflects commitment to moral principles and respects for others' right to know the truth. Loyalty, on the other hand, involves standing by someone, whether a friend, family member, or organization, through support, trust, and sometimes protecting them, even if it means withholding truth or bending it. Let's take an example to understand it. Imagine you know that a close friend has done something wrong, like breaking a rule at work. If you're asked about it, telling the truth could lead to your friend facing consequences, but it would be an honest thing to do. However, if you choose loyalty, you might protect your friend by keeping the information to yourself or even lying about it. In this dilemma, both choices have moral weight, and the decision often depends on which value, truth or loyalty, the individual prioritizes in that context or otherwise. So if we choose to be loyal, we would be going against the truth, and if we choose truth, we'll not be loyal towards our friend's safety. So moral dilemmas are very much a part and parcel of our lives, and therefore its ethical considerations are very important. However, they are not just practical situations where we have moral dilemmas, there are also a lot of moral dilemmas existing in medical and legal issues. Whenever one is in the situation of a moral dilemma, application of ethical theories can pave the way for action. Moral dilemmas are situations where an individual is faced with crucial questions like what I ought to do, what is the morally right thing to do, etc. Moral dilemmas have conflict in decision making in real, past and present events or future possibilities. Moral outcomes of drawing a certain legal document and other such situations. For example, in issue of euthanasia, the pertinent dilemma faced by policymakers, medical practitioners, legal experts are whether one has the right to die with dignity, whether the doctor has the moral obligation to respect patients' right to life. If the patients lack the capacity to make a decision about their own life, then who would be allowed to take a decision on their behalf? Whether there can be duty to die and such questions. So the debates and the content of discussing moral dilemma, be it in theory or in practical affairs, is enormous and rich. Well, how and in what way we can see that moral dilemmas may not just be seen as a problem, but they are interestingly and innovatively significant in our lives. So moral dilemma at the face of it may look like a trouble or a problem to resolve. However, one cannot completely avoid or eradicate moral dilemmas in life. So the important point is to see their significance in life. Moral dilemmas play a crucial role in our lives because they highlight the complexities and challenging of ethical decision making. They force us to confront situations where our values, principles and beliefs are tested. and they reveal often conflicting nature of these values. The significance of moral dilemma lies in several key aspects. First is self-reflection. Moral dilemmas encourage us to reflect on our values and ethical principles. They help us understand what we prioritize in life and why, based on our understanding and experiences in life and exposure in life. Second is moral growth. One significance of moral dilemma is that by facing and resolving them, we develop a deeper understanding of ethics and morality. We learn to navigate difficult choices, become sensitive towards them, and grow in our ability to make informed, thoughtful decisions. So it's better to have a reflection rather than to have a quick judgment. Next is building empathy. Moral dilemmas often involve considering the perspectives and well-being of others. This fosters empathy and helps us appreciate the complexities of different situations and viewpoints. So the more we are into a moral dilemma, the more we learn to understand the situation that a person is in from different perspectives, even our own situation. Understanding consequences. These dilemmas highlight the consequences of our actions. They teach us that every decision we make can have far-reaching effects on others and on ourselves, so that we understand the situations of our life even better. And we also develop an ethical framework. Encountering moral dilemmas help us develop and refine our ethical frameworks, whether they are based on utilitarianism, deontology and virtue ethics, or any other moral theory for that matter. We learn how to apply these frameworks in real life situations. So moral dilemmas are real life situations of our experiences where we are able to test our moral beliefs and theories on which we live. Now the next question is, how do we resolve a moral dilemma? As much as they are part and parcel of right, but the first aim is to resolve them. Resolving a moral dilemma is challenging because it involves often choosing between two or more conflicting ethical principles, at least seemingly conflicting ethical principles. While there is no one-size-fits-all solution to this, but however, a scrutiny of the following steps can help us guide to process of making a decision, resolving a moral dilemma. The first is to identify the dilemma clearly. The first point is to see the relative and the absolute situations that exist in a moral dilemma. Is moral dilemma an artificially created one or a real one? That's a very important point to see. So many times it happens that the dilemma can be resolved by just understanding it clearly, because sometimes there is a lack of understanding about the possible situations which may seem to be mutually exclusive and opposites, however they may not be on a deeper investigation. The second point is to gather all relevant information. So a moral dilemma should never be investigated with a limited information. As much information can be gathered related to that dilemma that we are facing, the better it will be for us to resolve it. The third is to reflect on ethical principles and see which one leads to the most relevant and the apt one for that particular situation, depending on its context and the universal principles involved. The next is considering the consequences. One should also see, when one resolves a moral dilemma, what will be the consequences of it. Perhaps that might also be a very good way to find out how to resolve a moral dilemma. The next is to consult others. No moral situation usually is discussed in isolation. It is always through the involvement of the other and the interpersonal connections with the other that moral dilemmas are happening and are also resolved. So it's important for us to consult others who are morally conscious beings to reflect on our issues of moral dilemma, because it could be that we may be only seeing from a dilemma from one perspective and therefore it may not be a dilemma, or even if it is a real dilemma, it may not be resolved by that. Also therefore it's important to weigh the options. Of what are the situations that we can see which could fit within that dilemma to resolve it. And finally, it is a making of a decision and reflecting on the outcome which leads to a solution, sometimes a panacea or a final one, or sometimes a temporary solution. So it's important for us to understand that moral dilemmas have its own nuances, and in life and while dealing with moral situations and ethical considerations, one must understand that some dilemmas may not have a final solution. And this is not just a loss, but rather a gain, because we can keep resolving them and improving in our lives and in our theories of morality to become better. So it's important to acknowledge that some moral dilemmas have no perfect solution. In these cases, the best you can do is make the most informed ethical choice possible based on the information and principles at hand. Being at peace with your decision, understanding that it was made with careful thought and consideration, is sometimes the most we can hope for. Practical dilemmas, as mentioned, are key aspects of applied ethics. Certain specialized areas warrant particular attention, including bioethics, environmental ethics, ethics and technology, media and cyber ethics, medical ethics, and business ethics. Additionally, there are dilemmas of special significance with these domains, such as those concerning abortion, reproductive rights, and animal rights. Moreover, there are issues that do not fit neatly into any one of these categories, but still raise significant ethical questions, such as violence, suicide, capital punishment, and even terrorism, which deserve their own space for ethical considerations. Moral dilemmas underscore the complexity of ethical decision making, illustrating the conflict between competing values and principles. They require a nuanced consideration of context and consequences, prompting critical reflection on moral judgments. Ultimately, addressing these dilemmas involves balancing conflicts, interests, and striving for well-reasoned ethical solutions. Moral dilemmas, therefore, are very important and significant for their complexities, for they illustrate the conflict between values and principles. So, philosophy is a way to not just give immediate answers. Ethics is something which doesn't just relate or rely on itself in morality, but also on addressing these dilemmas and questioning these known principles, which may get conflict with each other. So it's a very interesting point and beauty of philosophy to see in the realm of ethics, to resolve moral dilemmas, to see that how we can entertain things rather than avoiding them and running away from them. Ultimately, addressing these dilemmas involves balancing conflicts, interests, and striving for well-reasoned ethical solutions. So, coming to with this discussion on moral dilemmas, we can see some of the readings that we can consider for a greater and a deeper understanding of moral dilemmas, not just for our understanding, not only for learning, but also for applying them in our lives. So we can see there are some readings which can be important, and like moral dilemmas on other topics in moral philosophy, moral dilemmas, ethical dilemmas and decisions in criminal justice, practical ethics, and moral dilemmas reading in ethics and social philosophy. So thank you very much.